Do you ever wonder why most personal brands fail? Well, if so, that's what we're going to dive into in today's video. But before we get into it, I got to remind you, please like, subscribe, do all the things to help us reach more people on YouTube. We appreciate it so much. And without that engagement, we're not going to be able to reach as many people as we could. So let's get into it now. So this idea of, there's tons of personal brands out there. There's many of them that are not making it, right? So why? That's the big question. And we actually looked to somebody called Peter Sheehan for the answer to this big question, right? And it's pretty important because if you're out there trying to build your brand, trying to position yourself as a thought leader in some space to drive more traffic back to whatever you're selling, it's really important to understand like what mistakes do you need to avoid, to make sure that you continue to push forward, reach more people, build bigger platform, have bigger impact, etc. Right? So Peter Sheehan is somebody that studied a lot of really successful businesses and said like, what is it about these businesses that has allowed them to get to where they're at? The Apples, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the big companies that are out there, right? So what separates them from the companies that don't make it? And what he realized is that through his research and through his studies, that basically there were these key inflection points along kind of the journey or the growth of each of these businesses, where along the way, they basically had a tremendous amount of discipline and focus at these different stages of growth. And they weren't distracted by a lot of other things. They were basically able to say, look, there's opportunities out there that are available to us, but we're going to strategically choose to not go after them right now because we have limited resources, people, money, etc. Because if we go after them too soon, it's going to ultimately be a distraction in the short term and help us, keep us from being able to make progress, get good traction with the business, kind of get good product market fit, kind of establish ourselves and use that momentum to get to the next level. So they were very disciplined and strategic about saying no to things and really hyper focusing in on what they felt was the best kind of way to position themselves in the market at a certain given time. So we look at an Amazon, right? Like, well, like how did this play out for them? Well, we can all remember that back in the very beginning, Amazon just sold books, right? That's all you could get from them. But very quickly that evolved to where today you can get, frankly, about whatever you want from Amazon, and get it delivered in less than 24 hours in a lot of cases. So they've obviously evolved over the years to have product lines that are beyond our minds and hard for us to comprehend. But they didn't start off that way, because if they would have started off that way, they would have, wouldn't be where they are today. It would have been too much too soon, right? So they were very disciplined, very focused, and all along the way, they're like, look, we're dominating books. Let's strategically expand into the next product line, the next product line, the next product line, until eventually they have so many resources to throw at these things. They can move really fast. They can be doing multiple things at once. But in the early days, they were disciplined enough to not get distracted by all those shiny objects and those opportunities. So what we said is, like, hey, like, let's apply that. And we're working with personal brands all day, every day. Are we seeing some of these trends show up in the businesses that they're building? And what's interesting is, yes, you look at a Gary Vee, for example. In the early days, what was he known for? Well, Gary was the wine guy, right? He was using his personal brand and primarily focused on YouTube, to talk about wine and use that to drive growth of the family kind of wine business and liquor kind of store business that his dad had started, and he was kind of part of helping to grow that and expand it. But now, obviously Gary Vee does a little bit of everything, right? He's got a whole business enterprise, multiple businesses, talks about a lot of different things, but that wasn't the case in the beginning. He was hyper focused on the business that was in front of him, was laser focused on who's the ideal client for that. How do I position myself and my content in a way that gets in front of them, delivers value, pulls them back in to whatever we're trying to drive traffic to and sell. And through that discipline and through that focus, he was able to get enough traction where gradually over time, there's these strategic inflection points again, where you diversify out and diversify out and diversify out, where eventually you have these people that on the surface now, it's like, wow, how did they get there? Right. And how they got there was discipline and focus along the way and being able to say no to those shiny objects. You look at like a Tony Robbins, like Tony can talk about anything he wants now, writing books on money, right? But he didn't start off that way, right? He started off kind of as the infomercial guy and doing a lot of work in that space, and then evolved into the, you know, the events and all the things he does now. But again, you know, looking back and comparing the businesses these personal brands are growing to the businesses, the big businesses we know out there, there are some definite overlaps in the patterns of how they got there. And those patterns are basically around hyper focus and discipline along the way to be able to know what to focus on and know what, most importantly, to say no to. So if we dive deeper into this, I'm going to bring up the whiteboard and just kind of like, and so it's this idea that at any given point in time, right, we have this wall. We're all trying to break through Sheehans Wall. And what that just means is that over here, we're on the unknown side, and then over here is the known, right? And most people are over here, right? They're basically known by some people, of course, but they're not known by as many people as they want to. And they're trying to break through this wall, right, to get to the other side, to have a bigger platform, have bigger reach, have a bigger reputation, be able to drive more traffic to whatever there is they're trying to monetize through their personal brand and their business, right? So the question is, like, again, most people are over here. How do we get over here? How do we break through the wall? And why do most personal brands fail, right? And so as we look at this kind of concept of Sheehans Wall here, basically we're using this framework diagram to represent that story I just told you of what makes, you know, what makes the biggest brands, the biggest businesses, you know, the biggest, and how they got to where they are. But more importantly, like, why do most people not get there? And that's really what we're looking at here. And the reality is that in the early days, they have a lot of things going on. So offerings, you know, they're selling too many things to too many people. Messages, if I can spell. They have too many messages to too many different, you know, audiences, right? So selling too many things, using too many different sets of messages to too many different audiences on too many different platforms. And the reality is, it's such a noisy world out there that if you're all over the place like this and you don't have that discipline and that focus, what happens is you just hit the wall and you bounce off of it. You're not able to break through the noise. You're not able to break through the wall. And at the end of the day, what we learned through the Amazons and the Apples and the Gary V's and the Tony Robbins and the et ceteras, right, is that, again, along the way, they were able to create strategic focus based on the opportunities we see in front of us. What is the main thing we need to focus on selling? What is the right messaging to wrap around that thing we're selling? Who is our ideal client for that? And where does our ideal client hang out? And let's create hyper focus, hyper alignment around those things, you know, and when you consistently do that over and over again, you eventually break through the wall. And you think about it this way: if you have a sledgehammer and we're trying to break through this wall, right? If you're hitting some up here and hitting some here and some here and some here, right, you're gonna have a really hard time breaking through. But when we create that strategic focus and alignment across all of our resources within the company, which may be limited in the beginning, especially if it's just you, right? That's what gives us that opportunity to hit that sledgehammer, be consistent over and over again, and eventually break through that wall. And what happens is, you know, as you break through, right, we're not saying that forever you can only sell, you know, one thing or have one set of messaging or have one audience you serve, right? Just like with Amazon, it was books in the beginning, but it's other things over time. And so what happens as you break through the wall, naturally you're pivoting, right? And you're strategically expanding. We call it like land and expand in these accounts, or go after new kind of complementary segments of the market with a new offering, right? So naturally, you'll be able to introduce new things over time that help you grow, serve more people, have bigger impact, etc. But if you try to do everything at once, you're never going to be focused and aligned enough and consistent enough with what the market is perceiving from you to ultimately get traction and breakthrough. And then that's what keeps you stuck over here, where everything is very push. Now, you may be saying, like, well, how do I know which side of the wall I'm on? Right? That's where these kind of the energy of these two environments shows up. On the left, when you're trying to break through, everything's very push, you're grinding, right? You're getting after it. It's hard. Things don't come as easy. As you start breaking through the wall, the energy is more pull. You're being pulled into a lot of opportunities. You're having to get better at saying no to things because you got opportunities coming at you left and right. But what's important to really understand here, I don't care what side of the wall you're on, the kind of the principles here of understanding how to strategically focus and align resources around that focus is just as valuable over here as it is over here. Otherwise, even big brands, big businesses aren't able to get to the level they're capable of getting at because they get what's called diluted focus, which then leads to diluted results. Okay, so at the end of the day, the number one reason that most personal brands fail is that they have diluted focus and then they get diluted results as a result of that. So anyway, I hope this was helpful, guys. At the end of the day, you know, figure out what you're great at, figure out who you're best positioned to serve, really align, all of your resources, sales and marketing, delivery resources around that. That strategic focus is going to help you get traction, get wins with clients, create raving fans, get referred into new accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And then at those strategic points, you'll be able to see, all right, now's the time we feel comfortable to introduce the next thing to the next segment of the market, then the next thing to the next segment, right? But be very cautious about trying to do too much for too many people too early on. Otherwise, you're going to have diluted focus and then get diluted results.